So as I try to get this loaded, what we've done in Maryland is to develop a Maryland environmental justice screening tool. So the idea of this tool is to map environmental hazards and socio-demographic data across the state of Maryland to see if there's communities who have different environmental justice related risks. And so this tool is based off of the EPA's EJ screening tool. And the tool is also it leverages some of the work of the California EJ screening tool. So let me make sure this draft document. And so what we've been doing is working with the National Center for Smart Growth. The National Center for Smart Growth, their office is based on our campus. The tool, the Maryland EJ screening tool, was an outgrowth of a project called Presto. The National Center for Smart Growth was commissioned to do a report on climate change scenarios for the State of Maryland's Climate Change Commission. And as part of that discussion, they were interested in understanding people who may have vulnerabilities. And so the discussion, they want to look at vulnerabilities related to climate change. So as part of that, those discussions, they thought, well, let's look at communities who will be at risk from climate change, will be some same communities that will be at risk from environmental injustice. So the idea grew out of that to do an environmental justice screening tool. That tool was developed by colleagues at the National Center for Smart Growth, specifically Daniel Engelberg, with guidance and feedback from myself, Dr. Devin Payne-Sturgis, some faculty in Vsauce. And so now we have a tool that allows us to map different indicators and to see if there are, again, differences in risk and vulnerability in communities of concern. So what I want to do first is kind of walk you through, we have this draft sort of guide on the tool. So again, what is EJ Screen? It's a mapping and screening tool. So it's basically a GIS visualization tool that allows us to combine environmental information with demographic data, creating an interactive map that displays the level of environmental justice or injustice anywhere in Maryland. These maps can help you identify communities who may have environmental justice concerns. So it's a way to basically map communities to see where we should target resources. Map communities to see where we should target more. Is there issues with regulatory compliance? Is there issues with cumulative impacts? Are there issues with permitting? And so it's a way for you to highlight these communities, and then we could go in, work with community partners, work with advocates, work with practitioners, work with legal experts, similar to what you've seen in this symposium, right? The same kind of mix of stakeholder groups that you've seen in some of the sessions. We can use this tool to inform those partnerships, inform those collaborations, inform that work. So, what's an EJ score? So, the Maryland EJ Screen tool provides a score. The EPA's tool, EJ Screen tool, does not provide a score. And the other tool that we based our tool off of is the Cal Environmental Screen. It provides a score as well. So what is a score? A score shows the level of environmental justice or injustice in the area. Areas that have large numbers of low income or communities of color and high pollution levels potentially could have a high level of environmental injustice. And so we're basically, again, combining hazard data, effects data, and demographic data. And so the way that we do this is the demographic data looks at what we call basic demographic data, like percent people of color, educational attainment, and then we have data on sensitive populations. So children, elderly, individuals who may have underlying health conditions, like asthma, for example. So what does the score mean? So the score is represented by percentile, so it's basically a ranking. You're basically being compared to other geographic units. Okay, so our main unit of analysis is the census tract level. So if an area has an EJ score of 0.92, it has an EJ score higher than 92% of census tracts in the state or county. Okay, so it's just like for those of you taking GRE. It's a percentile ranking. In this tool, you can choose to compare the area to the average EJ score in Maryland or the average EJ score in Prince George's County. High scores, again, indicate a greater level of concern. So what I want to do now is go back to the mapping tool to kind of walk you through, walk you through parts of the tool. So what I'm going to do is go through each category that we have. So the first category, so that final score, we basically have major indicator categories. So the first category is the exposure category. So if I click on that category, basically exposure are some of the things that you can be exposed to that could lead to adverse health effects. And so we're talking about things like pollution burden, your exposure to different hazards, NATA, the National Air Toxic Assessment. That assessment is done every, I don't know the number used, but maybe every 5 or 6 years. So you can get estimated cancer risk from air toxics. You can get estimated respiratory risk and estimated neurological risk with the NATA data. We also have the respiratory hazard index. We have NATA diesel particulate matter. So this is an estimate of particulate matter associated with diesel exhaust. So you may have heard sessions today where community members are not just dealing with the issues of the industrial activity itself, but the fact that industrial production, there's traffic, industrial traffic associated with those facilities. And for example, in the community in Bladensburg that's dealing with the expansion of the concrete batch plant, the concrete batching plant, they have an issue with industrial traffic, particularly diesel exhaust. And with the expansion, there'll be 40 more diesel trips per day, which means that there'll be more diesel particulates. Diesel particulates can cause short-term effects. Diesel exhaust can cause problems with coordination, concentration, nausea, fatigue, headaches. Long-term effects will be cancer. You also have particulate matter. So this is based on actual readings, PM levels from the EPA monitors. So a lot of this data that we have for these various categories is data that's been collected by the EPA or other agencies, okay? So in many ways, this is sort of like a visualization using secondary data analysis, if that makes sense. We're not doing primary data collection, we're doing secondary data analysis. We also have ozone data. So let me click on one of the layers. Let me actually zoom in. So I will zoom into so basically, you can see the EJ score for Prince George's County, and you see that the areas that, of course, have the highest score, again, these are percentiles. That means in the 0.9 to 1 is greater than, as you heard the example, 92% of the census tracts when it comes to the overall EJ score. Now, when you go back to the, hold on a second, to the exposure, so I turned on respiratory hazards. Let me turn on diesel. So I turned on diesel particulate matter. So you can see again, I need to turn the overall score off. Hold on a second. Trying to get these layers right. So the next set of categories, turn this one back off. The next set of categories, the next category is environmental effects. So this is basically not necessarily the exposure category, but this affects where you have hazards, land uses that can impact environmental quality. So regardless of sort of the location, any kind of hazards that can impact environmental quality. So you have the overall, so this first pollution burden, environmental effect, that's the overall score for this total, for all the indicators in this subcategory, okay? So this will be the overall score. Then you can look at the individual score, EJ score for each indicator. So you have a lead paint indicator, you have proximity to risk management plan sites, proximity to treatment and disposal facilities such as landfills, proximity to national priority list sites, so any sites that maybe are Superfund sites, and I think we include sites that are on the NPL list that may have been cleaned up or haven't been cleaned up yet. And also major water discharges, so any stationary source that has received a National Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, so an NPDES permit. And you also have any rivers or watersheds that have watershed failure, so receive a low score as relates to the overall watershed score. So that's another subcategory. The third subcategory is sensitive populations. So again, you have the overall EJ scores. You can click on that. For all subcategory are socioeconomic factors. So we have percent low income, percent non-white, less than high school education, linguistic isolation, individuals under age 5, individuals over age 64, and unemployment. So a lot of these indicators that we have within this tool either are pulled from the US EPA EJ screen tool or are pulled from the Cal Enviro screen tool, okay? And then we have additional layers. So we want to contextualize this tool to be more relevant for the state of Maryland. So as part of that process, we engage stakeholders in Bladensburg. So we engage community members from Bladensburg. So some of you may have been in the Bladensburg session to get their feedback. We also engage stakeholders who participate in the Prince George's County Environmental Action Council. We engage stakeholders who participate on the Maryland Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainable Communities, and a few other stakeholder groups too. And so we wanted to ask them what are some of the indicators that you would like to see mapped, included as part of this tool. So to this point, all of you seen are scores. For some of you, you may be more interested in being able to map out the actual facilities. You want to map out the points. You want to map out the latitude, longitude coordinates of facilities that are in your community. So here are some of those additional layers. So we have point source water discharge. Under the Clean Air Act, we can classify sources as major, right, sources, And many of those major sources have to get an air quality permit, and then there's minor sources. You may have heard at this event so far, some of the sources of concern in some of the communities that are here are not major, they are minor. And I think you heard in the Bladensburg session again, that concrete block plant that's a concern, it is not required by state law to get the air quality permit. So that facility that's been in operation since the 1920s has never done any air quality monitoring. And of course EPA was established in 1970, so let's go to 1970. Since 1970, they've done no air quality monitoring, okay? So you have that facility type. We also have hazardous waste sites. One of the issues of concern, many times communities that are overburdened by hazards, that's not the only sort of stressor that they have. They may have lack of access to healthcare, health infrastructure. So we also have an indicator called health priority shortage areas. For many of you, when you think about environmental injustice, it's not just about physical hazards, it's also about access to resources, infrastructure. So food, you heard the term food deserts, food swamps. So we have a supermarkets indicator. So you can map those. We also have areas that are food insecure. So these will be limited supermarket access areas. So you see Superfund sites, the latitude longitude is Superfund sites. We also, when it comes to who are the areas that are going to be most at risk, right? We talked about children in multiple sessions. So having the location of public schools gives you an indicator of where children are who could be exposed to industrial emissions or also mobile emissions from some of the industrial traffic. And then one of the big issues that was raised in the Bladensburg community is they have a train that rolls through, and they were concerned about some of the potential safety and pollution impacts of that. So with this tool, not only are we drawing in information from federal databases and also state databases, we are pulling in information that's informed by the communities of concern and information that's more relevant to their context. And then one thing that we also are trying to do with this tool is to actually build in, make it more customizable. So community members collect their own data, and then they can import that data into the tool. For example, on Earth Day a few weeks ago, we worked with undergrad students to do a block assessment of certain blocks in Bladensburg. So the idea is we have an environmental checklist of 120 categories where they grade each block. Cracks and sidewalks, do you have crosswalks, trash, on that block, is it residential, is it commercial, is it industrial, what types of facilities, so all those things, and every category will never be filled out. So commercial blocks are somewhat different from residential blocks, and residential blocks are in many cases different from industrial blocks. But sometimes, as you know, in some communities, you can have mixed use. So a block could have industrial, commercial, and residential uses, okay? But that's one way that we're gonna try to customize this by importing some of that data that's been collected. So just to show you, just as an example, I'll just zoom in to Bladensburg real quickly. So actually, zoom in. Maybe I just do more than port towns, because you heard. So we turn on the public schools. Here's all the public, well, this is actually much bigger than Bladensburg, but you can turn on the supermarkets. Don't y'all see an issue with supermarkets? I think this may not be, I'm not maybe misremembering. I think there's one supermarket for every 1,000 people in Prince George's County. I think we only have 8, as of 2014 or 2015, we only had 82 supermarkets. So I think it's only 1 per 1,000. That's not a lot of supermarkets, okay? So so again, this is very useful when you're visualizing data. You can actually show where things are. Health priority shortage areas. So look at that whole, all of College Park, shortage area. So I'll turn that one off. Major air pollution sources, not that many. right? Not that many. But what will be interesting is, what about those minor sources? You're gonna see many more minor air pollution sources. So it's just not the ones that are, under the Clean Air Act that are categorized as major. If you have a lot of minor sources, you're gonna have a major impact on local air quality, and particularly on human health as well. And that's an interesting point. Just want to raise real quickly about how we do our monitoring. Usually with the US EPA and our state agencies, they may have a background monitor just getting the general measurements on air quality, and there may be only 3 or 4 monitors in a large area. But when it comes to communities that we're talking about at this particular symposium, what are the levels of pollutants in my neighborhood? So what are the levels of pollutants at the fence line near the factory, near the landfill, near the incinerator? So what happens is our industrial footprint is not, our monitoring footprint does not reflect our industrial footprint. We don't have enough monitors to really capture people's daily exposures to both industrial pollution or mobile pollution. Okay, so this has been really useful because we've been able to visualize where hazards are, and also where sensitive human receptors are, like children in schools, and also where some of the positive infrastructure is, or where it's not. So supermarkets will be part of that positive infrastructure. And let me keep that on. And if you look at hazardous waste sites, you see one hazardous waste site. You look at, so you see the minor pollution sources, the major pollution sources. Let's look at the minor pollution sources. That's not all of them. It's still rendering. I think it should be still processing. Let me see. Still rendering. So you're going to see, my point is, you're going to see many more minor pollution sources than major pollution sources. So let me go back for a second. See if I can get this. Just trying to show y'all. So Superfund sites, you're not gonna see a lot of those. You see some point source water dischargers.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you thought about, so clearly this is the measures for exposures. What about at the local community health clinics and also the local hospitals where you can actually get rates of inpatient, outpatient, emergency room visits where it could be linked to a primary diagnosis for cancer in terms of respiratory? Is it possible to layer over with this data to see some association?
You could see some association, some correlation. Of course, we're not talking about causality at all.
No.
Right? So we're not talking about causality. It's possible. One of the issues for us, we tried to engage the Maryland Environmental Health Tracking Program to see if we can get data down to unit analysis. Some of these data down to unit analysis that would be more useful, because part of the problem is a lot of data that's available is at the county level. That's not useful for this discussion. Even some of the data that's available at the zip code level is not useful in tracking exposure and health, those relationships. Mm-hmm. So that's a possibility. I think part of the issue is, how getting the data is going to be a problem, and then for some outcomes like with cancer, mm-hmm. we're not going to be able to do much unless you have a cancer cluster, which then you have to talk about the issue of causality, mm-hmm. and then the science. Right. One thing we didn't say, maybe in one of the sessions you heard this, but when it comes to communities that impact by environmental injustice, the science is there are multiple chemicals, right? There are multiple stressors, there are multiple routes, there are multiple pathways, there's chemical mixtures, there's synergistic additive effects. Our science is not, to be honest, our science is not keeping up with people's exposures. Mm-hmm. And so this is really just a screening tool. But the science needs to, so what you're saying is getting that cumulative risk assessment.
Yeah.
Cumulative risk assessment is nowhere near where it needs to be yet to really understand people's exposure to physical, chemical, biological agents, plus psychosocial stressors and the vulnerability. So we've been pushing, for example, some colleagues, the EPA, to use cumulative risk assessment, but that's been a slow going process. But I think we could look at federally qualified health centers, because a lot of those health centers are going to be in areas that are lower income areas. We could do some work to get some data through HRSA as well.
But even for advocacy, I think for Blackensburg, like we can potentially even submit comments to potentially the local health department that currently do community health needs assessment and community health plans. So to the extent if the public comment can actually address issues of pollution, having that as a priority area, as part of community health improvement, I think would be a tremendous.
So part of the reason it's not up here, but to speak to your point, a few years ago, the state of Maryland, I think 2012 or 13, passed the Maryland Health Improvement Health Disparities Reduction Act. And so part of that act was these health enterprise zones. So many of these communities that we're talking about in Prince George's County, they are classified as health enterprise zones. And so, but it focused more on healthcare access and less on built environment, environmental exposures, environmental hazards. But I think that's something we can look into. Yeah. So this is, in many ways, this is the starter tool. It still needs a lot of work on the data that we have in it, and also the functionality of it too.
Right.
Yeah, the functionality of it too. Any other quick questions? Y'all all simultaneous. I'm just gonna in the back. Yes, sir.
So I had a quick question. How does one assess this this mapping tool? Is it free or is it behind a paywall? Do you need to?
Oh, there's no paywall. I mean, it's not the best shape yet for there to be the paywall. We're still in, was it beta mode? Is it alpha mode? Which one is it?
Beta.
Yeah, because alpha. I think it's more the alpha of the ABC. You said beta mode, so we're in beta mode still. And so one of the issues with the tool is we only can do rendering of Prince George's County and surrounding counties of Baltimore City and surrounding counties because we can't run the whole state right now at the same time. It's the platform. We have to get on a different platform. So we have some infrastructure issues. We have to get on a different platform because we're at the, it was at the county level, we could do the whole state. It's at the census tract level. A lot more data. And so we can't do the whole state right now. But did you have another question besides that question? Okay, yeah, so we're working on it, but you can access it. Right, what we're doing, this the second part of the answer, we are engaging our partner, the National Center for Smart Growth, to figure out who's gonna house the tool and the infrastructure and maintenance of it, because we run out of funding. The original funder for the development of the tool, actually, as you heard me say, the original project was Presto. This was a side project. Presto was the climate change scenarios was funded by Town Creek Foundation on energy equity and climate change. And out of that, they want to look at vulnerabilities and said, well, let's look at environmental justice because that makes sense to build that into the climate change work. And so this tool was built, but the money is now run out. So we're trying to secure additional funding to deal with the infrastructure, the platform issue, the housing and staffing issue as well. So it's still in progress. Yes, sir.
Yeah. How do we know what communities those are? I mean, I just see shapes there. I don't know which.
Oh yeah, we can zoom in. I mean, you can see there's a faint outline. So East Riverdale is there, Hodgeville is there.
College Park is right in the middle.
Can you zoom in and show that?
Yeah. So
where it's labeled, what area or community it is.
And kind of related to that question, is there a way to see the waterways?
Yeah, I'm not sure we have a waterways layer, but we can add it.
See, there's the northwest branches on there.
So here's East Riverdale right here. Here's New Carolyn right here. Greenbelt Park, College Park, Hodgeville is right here. It's hard to see it. We're gonna have to maybe change the font and bold it. So we can make that tweak.
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah, we can. You see Chillums over here, Mount Rainer's down here, and here's Bladensburg.
But I don't see the word.
Next to the blue dot, it's hard to see.
You see
it's in the
Bladensburg
darker
right
areas,
there.
so it's-
Oh, can we turn the lights off so we can see
It's
it?
dark. Can't read.
Their color scheme is not this way for that.
Yeah, this is.
Indication of bad air.
That's one thing about doing GIS. It looks fine on the computer, but
Yeah,
then when you project it, so you might have to have a different.
the learning curve.
Yeah.
I don't want to turn off the wrong
Yeah,
way.
oh, that's
So-
good.
Yeah, there we go.
So you see a little bit better, but what we have to do is we have to just bold the towns. So the cursor key is right on Williamsburg.
Yeah. What about, are you intending, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
are you intending to add employers and unemployment data?
Oh yeah, we can add that data.
Do you have plans to?
So part of what we have, we did a project to go along with this to build in additional indicators. So under the socioeconomic indicators, we do have unemployment. What we also don't have, if you notice, we got to get the metadata in here too. So part of that project was actually to explain each indicator, why is it relevant, and then cite the scientific literature. So we have that too. So we have to build that in. So this still is a work in progress.
Who is willing to pay for it?
So we are trying to secure funding right now. If I knew that answer, I would have had the answer for you. So we're trying to secure funding right now. Part of the idea is we're doing different avenues. Can we talk to the schools to see if they can kick in some money? We also are trying to apply for a little pilot grant. There's a UMD seed grant program. We've also talked about trying to get Empowering Maryland money as well. And also other foundations too. So we're in the process of submitting proposals, but we need funding to, as I said, expand functionality, address the infrastructure and platform issue, and also IT support. You gotta have somebody on this, because this is not what I do. I mean, I'm a user, I'm not a builder.
Why don't you go to somebody with deep pockets, like the National Cancer Institute, and sell it to them as a research project where you could predict pockets of different kinds of cancer?
I think let's go to a different institute. Cancer is gonna be the one that's gonna be the hardest one to do.
But they've got the most money.
They actually, NIHS, very important issues, small money.
Yeah.
Cancer Institute, a lot of money. You're exactly right about the money, but I may want to go to, just because of cancer and this calls out cancer clusters.
NHLBI.
Yeah, NHLBI maybe, and actually what we
Well, yeah, they're interested in really behavioral issues, and that's why unemployment would be big.
yeah, I think NHLBI or even NMHD. There's some other ones. I know there's some grant makers. Actually, NSF in some ways probably better. Because you have the geographic systems, and you have social behavioral systems, social environmental systems, engineering. So NSF may be better because of just getting it built.
Sell it as geospatial mapping.
We do big data too.
Well, I also wanted to mention
Yeah, big
that
data as well.
I'm coming from, sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Can you speak to, I know this is a work in progress, so maybe you'll just speak to like the hopes of it in the future. Can you speak to the temporality of this? So like do you envision it being updated, like as supermarkets come and go away, or as different sites appear? Like, is there a plan to, because right now it seems that
It's more static. It's more static. So we could do that, but that gets back to my IT and having somebody who's like doing data mining and having the partners in place to say, hey. And then also what we talked about is this tool is going to be statewide, but we also talked about developing customizable tools for municipalities. So then you have somebody on staff, it'll be their job to keep that data uploaded and it'll be connected to the larger tool.
Yeah.
And in the metadata that you have to include, so then you would have for each of these, like when it was established, when
And
it
the
was,
year
so
the
then
year to
someone
data,
could
the
go
year to
back.
data, yeah, we can always do that. So we have the metadata now, we have years of the data. So some of the data is gonna be, average data, some of it may be trend data. So we have that in the metadata, but it hasn't been, so we gotta get somebody that's a lot of work to get the metadata.
Does
Just a quick
California
question.
use it to form policy?
Yeah, so California's tool has actually been, California's tool, if I remember correctly, they spend a 3 to 4 or 5 year process of engaging community stakeholders, bringing in academics, working with Cal EPA to build the tool. And so we have not done it to the extent that California's done it because they actually have more support from their state agencies. We're in a progressive state, right? Okay, let's keep moving. So let me.
One last question, just building on
Yeah,
what
go
you
ahead.
said. You said it's static, but what year does most of the data come
So
from?
most of the census data is 2010 Census data. And I actually think some of it actually comes from the community survey, so it'll be more up to date, like the 2016.
Yeah, but those are 5-year estimates.
Yeah,
from
so
Census.
there's the estimate, so you have that, and then the supermarket data is from a 2014. This is for Prince George's County, so we don't have supermarket data for the whole state.
Yeah.
Only supermarket data for the county. So what I was gonna say is we're gonna try to have customizable tools. So we may have a Prince George's County only tool.
Right.
We have a state tool, and then the Prince George's County tool is gonna have more fine-grained data.
Yeah.
And that's going to be informed by many cases by community partners who help us collect the data. Okay. And actually, I need to even step back. The original idea for this tool did not come from Cal Environmental Screen or EPA Screen. It comes from a tool I helped to develop in Charleston. So one of my community partners is from Charleston, South Carolina, Omar. So we developed a tool called EJ Radar. So the original idea for this tool actually comes from my work in Charleston. But as you see, Omar, we made more progress. With this tool, we had a little bit more resources to do it. But the idea is we wanna bring in more data. But to get to your questions, we need to have IT, and to get to your question, we need to get funding to actually hire IT, have staff support. And right now, we lost that, so it's kind of in a stasis mode.
In a holding pattern.
In a holding pattern. Let me get this question first. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Have you considered opening this up either for access for others or even open source what you're doing so that volunteer
Can
people
kick
with
in.
expertise or data
Yeah.
under some control, I don't know how you thought,
Because there's
can
currently-
help without you having necessarily to hire people?
That's another way to do it. I mean,
Yeah, there's no currently Code for America for Montgomery County, and DC's doing it, and they have meetups and open source hackathons. I was going to mention that I'm from Montgomery County, and we actually just won a very small data grant from Robert Wood Johnson on data across sectors. And
Okay.
to the extent that we can actually even collaborate, because some of the deliverables coming from our small data grant is actually to build a data sharing hub for data across sectors for community health improvement. So this is one of the great examples that I've seen so far that we can potentially even collaborate for the local health improvement coalitions at the state level
Yeah.
with Center for Health Disparities to move forward together. And
no, that's definitely, I'm open to those ideas. I think the open access could be one way to do it. Definitely partnering, 'cause most of what I do is partnership, so all about partnerships, so that's good. I was gonna say is, I think you asked a question about, somebody asked a question about application or the vision. Part of the goal is, there's been a lot of questions in the state of Maryland about what is environmental justice. And it's been highly problematic because we already know what environmental justice is. To me, it's like, it's a way to delay action on issues. So part of the reason why we have this tool is there can be no longer be indecision about what environmental justice is and what a community impact environmental justice is, because we have actually indicators following other tools that have been vetted. Now we have to go through a vetting process to make sure this tool is actually in the best shape and is usable, but the idea is for it to be used for state policy. So if you have a health impact assessment law, then this is a useful tool. If you have an cumulative impacts bill, which we've had 3 times and we stopped. The last one was a bill, what was it called? What was the acronym for again? Yeah, I came up with that. That's probably why it failed. It was reducing, what was it? Reducing environmental degradation in underserved communities through community engagement. Reduce that. You know what I do with acronyms. But the bill failed. But was actually it was a watered down version of the original cumulative impacts bill, and that was a watered down version of the second version of the bill. And part of the reason why both those 3 bills failed, because people could not come to agreement what environmental injustice was, what it looked like. So this tool, once we get it out there, will be a tool that will help fill that gap, so they no longer have that excuse. They may come up with another reason for inaction in this state, but the environmental justice, how it is looked and what data you use, they will no longer have this excuse. So I want to talk to you about open. We can both talk about open and hackathons and people who have time.
Yeah. I mean, literally, now in DC, they run meetups twice a month where people sit down, go to the AAAS building, have pizza for half an hour.
Which tool is this?
Code for America, DC.
Code for America, DC.
It's a meetup, and it's literally open source, crowdsourced civic projects for coders, like data enthusiasts, and like literally programmers who just wants to do good.
Just want to forget.
And
You're still there.
And it's just, you know,
Yeah,
people
there
just
are-
thank you
There are
so much.
several government data groups that are working on this, and
Yeah, I mean, part of this larger discussion, y'all you're bringing in citizen science, so, and crowd mapping. So this is another. So I'm part of the Citizen Science Association. I don't know if y'all know about the Citizen Science Association. Y'all should join it. I'm also on the editorial board for the journal, Citizen Science, and the next meeting is going to be 2019 in Raleigh, North Carolina. So we're already planning it. So what you're talking about, I'm very much into.
Yeah.
But I've been kind of stuck with just, you know how you get to the, money runs out, trying to figure out what the next steps are. So you're really getting me excited about trying to use
with the
that
limited
resource.
pot of money that we have, we're organizing mid-September a public workshop where you all can definitely all come and just talk about data and talk about data across sectors. Mid-September and also mid-October in Montgomery County. So we can initiate the discussion and certainly engage in other ways that we can just get this mobilized through really, like, I think, collective impact and not just county government.
Yeah, because I'm actually speaking to the Montgomery County planning something, 2 weeks.
Well, Makeover Montgomery just happened yesterday and the day before, where I presented, so.
Okay, so I'll bring this tool into that conversation.
Okay.
Other questions that you have? I mean, so we want to use this tool for policy. We want to use this tool for enforcement. We want to use this tool for permitting. Because this is part of the to me a big issue. If a facility follows all the rules, and you're hearing about facilities at this event that are not following all the rules, but when they do follow all the rules, what happens is it's out of context. They're not taking into context there's other hazards that are already there. There are already 2 million chicken farms, and for Kirkland and Eastern Shore, there's not even a permitting process for chicken farms, right? They don't get a permit. There's really no zoning for agriculture. It's mixed residential agricultural zoning. So you can build a chicken farm anywhere. One day it's a tobacco farm, next day it's a chicken farm.
Near university? Anywhere.
Yeah, anywhere. So it can be used to inform zoning. You know, so these are some of the impacts that we want to see with the tool. And as I was saying, I didn't do the best job of showing you all the scores. I was having a little bit of trouble with the scoring. But you can get a score for each individual indicator. You get a score for the subcategory and get an overall score. Okay, so there's 4 major categories. So you can get a score for each of those individual indicators, the subcategories, and then the aggregate overall percentile score. Okay? So I was having little issues with it, but that's one of the things you can do. And then, as you see, we're trying to get all these facilities in it. So to get back to your point, communities have concerns. There's some things they want to be included. There's some things we don't have data on. Right? There's some things we do not have data on. And so we don't have good green space data. We don't have good parks. You know, there's some on the solution side. Like, we just want this tool to show the problems. We want to show where the investments have been made or we need to make as it relates to water quality, as it relates to watershed restoration, as it relates to stormwater, you know, sort of mitigation. Wetlands. We need that data. And I think, are those data available within these agencies? If data is not available, how can we use remote sensing, satellite data to do the data ourselves?
Or iPad minis to literally collect data at the street level using the ArcGIS apps.
Well, that's what I said about the block assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't. So our block assessment is kind of old school, but we got to app it. We got to turn it to an app. So one of my colleagues was actually presenting in the 4th block, Marcus Hendricks. He's going to present on his infrastructure app tool.
Great.
Okay, so Marcus and I talked about taking our block assessment tool and converting it to an app. So people, that's true citizen science. So a big part, if you haven't heard, a big part of this theme and you're hearing today is citizen science. And so that's something that we're going to try to do with exactly what you just said.
If we want to access this, do you have a link to it?
Yeah, I have a link to it. So that's not the best link. We have to find a way to shorten it. But yeah, I can get you access to it and make sure that our colleague who developed it, Daniel, he's actually not just the money ran out, he's leaving to go to a PhD program somewhere else. So the person who actually built the tool is also leaving. So we're, there's potential, but we need some help. Okay?
So how can we get that?
So just email me.
Right, you can have a card or?
Yep. Not
How
this card.
much does this rely on census data?
A lot of
And are you concerned about the threat to this?
that's an issue.
That's environmental injustice.
Yeah, I mean the whole issue with the census is highly problematic. It could end up being an undercount because of some of the unnecessary regs that they're adding. Right, you have to be a U.S. citizen and some other things they're trying to do. So I think that the way to combat that is to potentially use citizen science and use these apps where we go out and do our own community census. Right.
The census itself have also been really going through some updates. I mean, as of February, they actually started this whole data visualization newsletter where I actually recently presented at the Makeover Montgomery 4 Festival at Montgomery County Planning, where they're now having this census community engagement navigator where you can actually drill down to the census tract area and look at data up until 2016 on different language spoken, education level, just typical socioeconomic indicators. So they're coming out with that now, and it's just starting in February. So there is some traction within the agency, but I definitely agree that we still need to collect at the neighborhood level just to tell the story to get to the disparities.
And the interesting thing about, as you know, about census tract data, census tracts are used as a proxy for neighborhoods. They're not your neighborhoods. Your neighborhoods are irregularly shaped, right? And so the only city in this state that I know that actually has actual neighborhood level data is Baltimore, the Baltimore Neighborhoods Indicators Project. So that's a model for how we can actually collect data at the actual neighborhood level. So they have social demographic data, they have health data, they have other data, and you can actually and you can map it too. So they already have their own visualization tool. So part of what we can do is incorporate some of the Baltimore's data into this. But there's a lot of opportunity here. What we need is more input, and actually as stakeholders for those of you who are from the state of Maryland, pushing our legislature to say we need to be using more data-driven tools and approaches to address health issues in our state, and visualization tools. There's some limitations to them.
Yes.
Because there's never going to be a complete data set. There's always going to be some error and uncertainty. But it's better than what we have, because right now we have nothing. We have no tool like this that's being used to inform enforcement, compliance, permitting, investments of Clean Water Act restoration funds, investment of TIF funds, investment of community development block grants, and then what's the tracking? What's the impact? Where the dollars going? Where's the map for all the investments of all the dollars and tax dollars? Then we don't have no tool like that. So where's the accountability? So this tool will actually help bring in accountability too, particularly as it relates to addressing some of these issues that we're concerned about, environmental injustice and also relevant health inequities. Okay. Any other questions? We have more time. So any more other thoughts?
Well, I'm just concerned if you're going to be using it to compare neighborhoods, cities, counties, and so forth. If Baltimore has better data, how can you then compare it to a city that doesn't have such great data?
We don't have to. I said we can bring in Baltimore's data. We can use the same data. Have same data conformity. So use the same data sets across the board. But they do have some better data. So we haven't brought the data in. But if we do bring that data in, we couldn't compare Baltimore to other cities. We can only compare Baltimore within Baltimore.
Within Baltimore.
It's only within. We couldn't do. We can only do intra, not inter comparisons.
Yeah, but to have an impact on legislation and so forth, don't you have to be able to compare across?
You can, but within Baltimore City itself, you have a lot of variation. You have a lot of variation in Baltimore itself. Part of the problem with another issue, not just with the rendering, another issue with the statewide map, when you bring Baltimore in, Baltimore skews the whole state. So that's why it's important not just to look at the state level, because you may lose. Baltimore dilutes what's happening in other parts of the state. So you take Baltimore out, then those areas stand out better. So that's, we were doing some analysis like, wow, it's not as bad as people are saying in Bladensburg. Because we had Baltimore in. We took Baltimore out, just focused on the Prince George County. Oh, okay, now we see what we thought we were supposed to see. So that's why you want to have maybe more metropolitan level. If you think about Baltimore City and surrounding counties, more of an MSA level tool. But then we look at someone like Kirkland's area, Eastern Shore, then you would need to have more of a regional tool because the Eastern Shore is very different than Baltimore and Prince George County. And then Western Maryland is different, is actually very different culturally in many ways and geographically. So it's more similar to other parts of the app, that region. So we talked about having regional tools. We also talked about trying to bring in mapping by legislative district. Because when you're, what the score is when you're legislative district. And then we also talked about what would be the benefits of trying to bring in real estate data. So I think there was a presenter who made a comment earlier, I'm not sure it was an incorrect comment, that a lot of this stuff is disclosed to folks that buy houses. This stuff is not disclosed when people buy houses. So part of what we talked about is, can we come with our own sort of like Zillow, thank you, and bring that in so people can know. But this is also the negative side of doing that. Because we don't want to put a negative label on communities.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, for homeowners, when it comes, they don't know. And then they get stuck in a house where they may have a cold point. People just bought a house there and they are now living there at natural gas location facility. Or people who are not living near a chicken farm. And they just had I want to be in a rural landscape because I love, but they're right by a chicken farm. So we have to figure it out. But part of the idea is we want to give people more information. But not a negative labeling to communities. When we talk about communities that are impacted by environmental injustice, I don't want always people perceived as negative. What we're trying to do is what's the vision to improve communities. And so the way to flip this tool is not in a way of looking at all the negatives, but doing asset mapping and where communities don't have enough assets and taking more of a salutogenic approach to how we can do community building. How can we make communities more resilient? So this tool could actually be used for resiliency building, resiliency mapping. That's a different frame. Instead of making it negative, let's do resiliency mapping. And how can we improve social, economic, environmental health resiliency? So that's a different way to use this tool, okay? And I think for many communities, it'd be a more positive and in a way, a transformative way to use the tool too. Other questions?
Well, I just have one question about all those minor sources. I mean, when you showed the map of those, can those add up to a major source? I mean, that's a way of raising awareness when you're making an argument with the batch plant or a legislator saying, look, it might look small, but let's do the multiply by 50.
Let's put it in context.
And I mean, does that?
I think it's the power of data visualization. If you can actually see all the sources, we have this gas station here, gas station there, we have this small facility here. All together, this area has already been degraded. Now, one thing that won't match up what I just said, we could make an assumption that it's been degraded, air quality's been degraded, but as I said earlier, the EPA monitoring network is, it's not extensive. There's a paucity of monitors. So really they'd be using some of the citizen science monitors that actually fill in the gaps. So what my statement about degraded air quality, we actually matched it with actual data. So you may see a burden disparity in the distribution of major minor sources, but we may not have the data on to see if there's exposure disparities because of our monitoring networks. But I think the visualization of the hazard distribution and the distribution of facilities can help tell a story. And that gets to my earlier point about when we permit facilities, we have to start using context. They act like these facilities have been built in a vacuum, and they're not. That's part of the biggest problem. And so then the communities already have multiple minor sources, other types of hazards, they get another facility. And so just this basic visualization approach with the latitude, longitude coordinates facilities and the score, that could be enough, maybe not to impact the legislator, but to impact the community members so they have more knowledge and they can go in with be able to discuss these issues better with their legislative representative. And it's a start.
Well, I congratulate you. I think it's fascinating.
It's a start. Thank you. I know it needs work. This is a work in progress. Yeah. We appreciate the feedback. And thank you again for your questions. The next session starts at 2:45. And then, so the next batch of sessions are workshops. So if you're interested in this issue, if you're interested in citizen science and apps, I think you should go to Dr. Hendrich's, go to any of the sessions, but that session is really a good follow-up to this session.
Which one?
Dr. Marcus Hendrich's section on PATTY. I know it's the acronym, I don't know what it stands for,
It's
but
still here.
it's PATTY.
It's in Thurgood.
It's in this room?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you.